But when the river ran dry and the earth began to die, the king made a deal no father should ever make. To save his people, he had to marry his own daughter. This is the legend of the serpent's dowry, a story of power, deceit, and a love strong enough to break a curse.
Beneath the great African sun, the kingdom of Ashari stretched wide and golden, a tapestry of rivers and fields, hills stitched with clay huts, and markets that throbbed with color. From the high palace terrace, King Jomo watched it all. The grain sellers shouting their prices, the laughter of children running barefoot through red dust, the smoke rising from the evening fires. He breathed it in and thought, this is what peace smells like. For 20 years, his reign had been the measure of prosperity. Raiders feared his armies. Merchants from far lands bowed low at his gates. In the songs of the griots, he was called the shepherd of the people, the hand that holds the rain. And yet, in the heart of all that gold and glory, something hollow began to whisper. It began the year the queen Nyala fell ill. The fever took her like a storm takes a tree, swift, ruthless, leaving no time for goodbye. They say the palace lights burned for 7 nights as healers worked in silence, grinding herbs, chanting prayers that felt too small. King Jomo sat by her bed through every hour. He fed her water with his own hands. He called her name until his voice was sand. When her breath left, he did not cry. He only said, "The gods have stolen my voice," and sat there until dawn, eyes dry, hands trembling. The palace mourned, the markets quieted. But grief, when it belongs to a king, cannot be loud. He rose after 7 days, put on the crown, and gave the order that festivals must continue. "Let the people dance," he said. "Let the drums play for her spirit." But when the music began, the king did not smile. They said King Jomo walked through the halls like a shadow of himself. He still judged disputes beneath the old baobab, still rode in processions through the market, still laughed when laughter was expected. But every night, the same silence sat beside him, heavier than the crown. The courtiers learned to fill the empty air with praise, the kind that feels like pleading, "Long live the king! His wisdom rivals the river." But the river was running low that year, and wisdom felt brittle. There was only one spark that still pulled Jomo from the tide of sorrow: his daughter, Amara. She was 16 now, full of spirit and intelligence, her mother's grace and her father's stubborn eyes. In her, he saw both memory and future. Some mornings he would stand on the palace balcony, hidden behind a stone pillar, watching her train with the guards. Her spear moved like lightning, her stance sure, unyielding. When she finally spotted him, she would grin. "Kings shouldn't spy," she teased. "Kings observe," he answered. That smile, how it reached her eyes, was the only thing that could lift him from the graveyard of his thoughts. He would walk beside her in the courtyard garden, pretending to correct her form, but really just trying to feel alive. She would talk about the lessons she was learning: diplomacy, trade, the art of leading people without breaking them. He listened, pride and fear mingling in his chest. When she joked, he laughed. When she fell silent, he wanted to promise her the world. But he had already promised that once, to a woman who no longer breathed. At night, Amara visited the palace nurse, Mama Shani, old as memory and twice as wise. The nurse would tell stories by firelight, her voice as rough as river stones. Amara loved one story most: the prophecy of the serpent's dowry. When the Ashari river runs dry, the heir's true price must be paid, or the serpent will rise from stone to claim what pride has betrayed. Amara had heard it since childhood, but this time she frowned. "Why must the heir pay, Mama Shani?" she asked. "Why not the king who causes the drought?" The old woman smiled sadly. "Because destiny is a debt children inherit. But remember this, debts can be rewritten by the brave." The fire cracked. Amara stared into the flames and whispered, "Then I'll be brave." Months later, the prophecy began to unfold. The rains faltered. Clouds passed without blessing the land. The great Ashari river began to shrink, its banks cracking, fish gasping, boats stranded on dry mud. The markets grew quieter. Mothers walked miles for water, only to return with half-empty calabashes. Children played in dust instead of puddles. Amara disguised herself in a plain wrapper, slipped out among the people. She saw hunger etched into every face. A child tugged her sleeve, eyes too large for his thin face. "Will the king bring the rain?" he asked. She knelt, gave him her water skin. "Soon," she said, though her throat burned with the same thirst. When she returned, she found her father listening to his council argue. One said they must dig new wells. Another said they must sacrifice livestock. A third, with fear behind his eyes, whispered of Mambisa, the witch of the Black Rock. Her name filled the room like smoke. Elder Kosi, the oldest among them, leaned on his staff. "My king," he said, voice shaking. "There are powers beyond the reach of our altars. The witch of the Black Rock knows how to speak to them. If the drought is a curse, only she can break it." Jomo's face darkened. "You ask me to kneel before the woman whose kind my fathers cast out?" Kosi met his gaze. "I ask you to kneel before survival." Silence fell. Even the torches seemed to waver. At last Jomo spoke, his tone hollow. "Send her word. Tell her the king of Ashari will hear her counsel." At dusk he rode out alone. The whisperwood was waiting, its trees like thin ghosts, its air thick with the memory of forgotten prayers. He left his guards behind. Every branch that cracked beneath his feet sounded like a warning. By the time he reached the Black Rock, the sky had turned the color of blood. The outcrop rose sharp and jagged, like a tooth broken from the earth. At its base, a hut squatted, woven from thorn and shadow. Smoke rose from a hole in the roof, greenish and alive. He dismounted. The wind hissed through the trees. For a moment, he thought he heard voices whispering his name. Then he stepped inside. The air was thick with herbs and something metallic, iron perhaps, or blood. A woman sat before a small fire, stirring a pot with a bone-handled spoon. Her hair was white as salt. Her eyes, gold, not brown, not yellow, pure gold. And when she lifted them, the light caught them like twin suns. "So the river's sun finally comes," she said, voice low and sharp. "You are late, Jomo of Ashari." He stiffened. "You know me? I know every man who drinks from the river my ancestors once guarded." She gestured for him to sit. "Tell me why you've come." He spoke of drought, of dying crops, of people losing faith. She listened in silence, only her spoon moving, stirring a black, bubbling liquid. When he finished, she smiled slowly. "The river is not dying," she said. "It is withholding. Your line stole its heart long ago. Your fathers took the sacred rights of the water from my mothers, and so the river waits for repayment." Jomo frowned. "What payment?" She lifted a small object from a bowl and held it out. A single scale, dark green with veins of silver. It shimmered like wet skin. "The serpent's dowry," she said. "It was promised generations ago. To save your people, you must restore balance." "What must I do?" Her smile widened, slow and cruel. "The river demands union of blood and blood. The king must take the air as his queen." Jomo recoiled, nearly stumbling. "You speak madness. Madness is simply truth you fear to touch," she hissed. "Refuse, and your people will eat dust before the moon turns." She placed the scale in his trembling hand. "You have 3 sunrises to decide." As he rode back through the forest, he swore the trees whispered behind him. He could still feel the weight of the scale in his palm, light as a feather, heavy as sin. That night, he placed the scale on his table and stared until dawn. The more he looked, the more it seemed to breathe. And so began the darkness that would change Ashari forever. King Jomo rode back through the whisperwood beneath a sky that refused to shine. The scale burned cold against his chest where he'd hidden it, and the wind carried voices that sounded too much like his own thoughts. When the palace walls finally appeared through the haze, he was already older. He dismissed his guards without a word, climbed the steps alone, and entered the queen's empty chambers. Nyala's scent had long faded, but he still reached for it. that trace of shea butter of river breeze after rain. He sat before her mirror and waited for sunrise. 3 mornings, 3 chances to unmake the curse or to become it. The first sunrise broke weak and colorless. From the balcony, Jomo watched women fill gourds with mud water while their children cried beside them. By the second sunrise, the smell of smoke reached the palace, farmers burning their dead goats rather than watch them rot. At noon, a mother brought the body of her child to the gates and laid it at the guard's feet. "The king must feed what the gods have taken," she said, and walked away. The third sunrise rose behind a wall of dust. No birds sang. Even the drums of the morning market had gone silent. Jomo called the council. He stood before them, his voice calm as stone. "The river demands repayment," he said. "The witch of the Black Rock has named the price." Elder Kosi's cane struck the floor. "And you believe her? That creature speaks only to her own ghosts." Jomo's gaze drifted to the window where sunlight fell in broken shafts. "Ghosts or not, she holds the drought in her hand." The council erupted, shouts, curses, prayers tumbling together. Kosi leaned closer, eyes wet. "My king, if you do this, we will lose more than rain. We will lose ourselves." Jomo's answer was a whisper. "We already have." That afternoon, messengers carried the decree across Ashari. Word spreads faster than mercy. By nightfall, the markets were alive again. Not with trade, but with horror. The people gathered in corners, voices sharp as cracked glass. "The king will marry his daughter," someone said. "No, it is a riddle, a test from the gods," another replied. But deep down, no one believed in riddles anymore. Children asked why the moon looked red. Priests closed their shrines. And in the palace, Amara heard the rumor long before the guards came to tell her. She burst into the throne room, fury wrapped in royal silk. "Tell me it's a lie," she demanded. Jomo turned slowly. His eyes were rimmed with sleeplessness. "It is the will of the river." "The river," she laughed, a sound brittle enough to cut. "You would rather break the law of the gods than admit you are afraid." He rose from the throne. "I would rather save my people than bury them. They will be buried in shame if you do this." For the first time since her mother's death, Jomo's voice cracked. "You think I want this? Every breath I take burns." He took a step closer, reaching out, and stopped when he saw the horror on her face. "Then stop," she whispered. "Be the man mother loved, not the shadow she left behind." He looked away. "The decree is sealed." Amara's anger melted into disbelief. "Then you are no longer my father." Her footsteps echoed down the corridor, and somewhere deep inside the king, something broke that no prophecy could mend. That night, Ashari did not sleep. Women sat on rooftops, whispering prayers to the stars. Men drank palm wine they could barely afford, to drown a fear they could not name. In the temples, the priests argued whether the gods had turned their faces or whether mankind had simply gone blind. And all across the kingdom, people waited for rain that did not come. The following dawn, the witch Mambisa entered Ashari. Her procession cut through the marketplace like a knife through cloth. Cloaked followers scattered herbs that smoked blue. Children hid behind their mothers. She bowed low before the palace gates. "The king has answered the river's call," she said, and the air itself seemed to flinch. Inside, she demanded the east wing, the queen's old chambers, and hung the walls with charms carved from bone. That night, servants swore they saw shadows moving even when the candles were still. The witch of the Black Rock had moved into the heart of Ashari. Amara was confined to the queen's tower, not as prisoner, but as sacrifice in waiting. They took her jewelry, her books, her weapons. Her meals came through a wooden slit in the door. At first she screamed at the guards. Then she stopped speaking altogether. In silence, she listened, to the distant chant of the witch's followers, to the mournful cry of the dry wind. When sleep refused her, she wrote by candlelight in the margins of her mother's journals. "If truth is forbidden," she wrote, "then I will carve it into the dark." Days blurred. But one night, when even the guards had nodded off, she crept to the shelves. There, behind a tapestry, she found an old chest of scrolls, brittle, dust-covered, written in the river's ancient tongue. By the flicker of flame, she traced the faded lines, lips moving with the rhythm of old magic. And then she saw it, the missing verse. When the Ashari river runs dry, the heir's true price must be paid, with the serpent's own dowry, or the serpent will rise from stone. Her pulse quickened. With the serpent's dowry, not for it. Mambisa had inverted the meaning. The dowry was meant to be taken from the serpent, not offered to it. Her father was not saving the kingdom. He was feeding it to a curse. For the first time since the decree, Amara smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile, the kind storms wear before they break. At that same hour, King Jomo sat alone in the Hall of Ancestors, staring at the serpent's scale glowing faintly in the dark. When he blinked, he saw it move.
When he looked away, it whispered. And in the space between those breaths, father and daughter dreamed of each other, one drowning in guilt, the other rising from despair. The storm had not yet come, but the wind had changed direction. Night bled into dawn. Ashari's sky was the color of rust, the sun rose weak and red, as if ashamed to shine on the kingdom below. The witch Mambisa walked the palace corridors as though she had built them herself. Servants scattered before her, torches hissed out when her cloak brushed past. Her eyes glimmered with that same molten gold, light that burned but did not warm. She entered the king's chamber without knocking. "Your people murmur," she said. "They doubt you." Jomo did not rise from the throne. "Let them. They will live to speak their doubts once the rains return." She smiled. "So certain. Yet your daughter grows restless. You feel it, don't you? The bond between you twists and snaps like an old rope." He clenched his hands. "Leave her out of your mouth." Mambisa tilted her head. "I can no more leave her out than the sky can forget the sun. Without her, there is no balance. Without you, there is no curse to break." Her words slithered through the air. 3 days more, and the ceremony begins. Prepare your soul for its cleansing. When she was gone, Jomo exhaled as if he'd been underwater. In the tower, Amara kept reading the scroll until her eyes blurred. The candle had long melted to wax puddles, but she refused to stop. Each line she translated strengthened her resolve. The serpent was not a destroyer, it was a guardian bound in anger, forced to punish until the stolen rights were returned. Her ancestors' greed had turned a protector into a monster. She realized the true dowry was the serpent's own offering, not the king's shame. It was meant to restore harmony, not violate it. She needed proof. She needed an ally. The next afternoon, Mambisa entered to inspect the bride. Her smile was honeyed poison. "Sleep well, little queen?" Amara bowed her head, masking her fury. "As well as a woman can before her wedding." Mambisa chuckled. "Good. Acceptance suits you. The river loves obedience." When the witch turned to leave, Amara spoke softly, almost kindly. "I read the prophecy again, High Interpreter." Mambisa paused. "Did you now? It says the heir's price must be paid with the serpent's dowry. Strange wording. What if we have misread it all these years?" Mambisa's golden eyes flared, but her voice stayed calm. "You are young, child. Words bend under power. Do not break yourself trying to straighten them." Amara met her gaze. Maybe power should bend to truth instead. The witch laughed, a sound that scraped like metal on stone. "Truth is whatever survives the telling. You will learn that soon." When she left, Amara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from confirmation. Mambisa was hiding something.
That evening, Elder Kosi came to the tower under the guise of delivering food. He found Amara sitting by the window, eyes fierce. "Child," he whispered, "the people are frightened. They do not know what to believe." "Then tell them to believe in me," she said. Kosi blinked. "What are you planning?" She handed him a folded scrap of parchment, a translation of the true prophecy. "Find the old nurse Shani. Show her this. She will know what it means. The elder hesitated. If they catch me. They won't, Amara interrupted. And if they do, remind them I am still the blood of their queen. For a moment, he studied her. The defiance, the echo of Nyala's fire, and nodded. As you wish, my princess. When he left, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Movement. In the great hall, Jomo sat before the altar, the serpent's scale glowing faintly. He heard footsteps behind him and thought it was Mambisa again. But when he turned, he saw a shadow he'd almost forgotten. Shani, he breathed. The old nurse stepped into the lamplight, her face lined, her eyes sharp. You called for demons, she said. And now you seek angels. What is it you truly want, my king? He dropped to his knees before her. An act no one had seen in decades. I want to undo what I've done. She sighed, placing a wrinkled hand on his shoulder. You cannot undo grief, Jomo, but you can choose what grows from it. He told her everything. The drought, the witch, the prophecy, the command to marry his child. When he finished, the fire between them sputtered blue. The river's wrath is real, Shani said quietly. But so is its mercy. There is another path if you dare take it. She described the 3 sacred relics needed for the countercurse. The seed of the stone palm, a drop of royal blood given freely, and the true dowry, a symbol of love untainted by greed. Jomo's eyes widened. How would I find these? You won't, she said. Your daughter will. He shook his head. I will not send her to danger. She is already in it, Shani replied. But she carries her mother's courage. Trust that. Later that night, Jomo sat at his table with a piece of Nyala's old comb in his hand. From it, he carved a small wooden tortoise, the same kind Nyala used to give Amara as a child, symbols of patience and wisdom. Inside its hollow shell, he placed Shani's map and a single line written in his trembling hand. Forgive me, save them all. He sealed it with wax, prayed once to ancestors he no longer believed heard him, and called his most loyal servant. Teyo, he said, take this to the queen's tower. Say nothing. Give it only to her. The man bowed. May the gods hide me. They already hide us all, Jomo murmured. Teyo moved like a ghost through the palace. He avoided the guards by memory, slipped through servant halls that smelled of dust and fear. At the tower door, he whispered, for the princess, and slid the tortoise through the slot before vanishing into the dark. Amara found it before dawn. She turned the tiny figure over in her hands, tracing the carvings of rivers and stars. When she cracked the shell open and found the map and her father's message, her heart clenched. Forgive me, save them all. She closed her eyes. I will. By morning, Mambisa's attendants arrived to prepare her for the purification ritual. They bathed her in cold water mixed with herbs that stung her skin, combed her hair with bone, painted her palms with ash. All the while, they hummed a tune that once belonged to birth celebrations, now twisted into something mournful. Amara endured in silence, the tortoise hidden beneath her robe, the map pressed against her skin like a heartbeat. When they left, she stared out the window. Dark clouds hung motionless above the horizon, heavy but unyielding. She whispered to the empty sky, if you still remember my mother's name, let the wind carry me. Outside, a gust rose suddenly, rattling the window bars. Amara smiled. So you do remember. The storm was stirring, and somewhere deep in the forest, the serpent that had slept for generations shifted in its dreams. The night before the ceremony arrived without stars. Ashari lay under a sky that looked carved from iron. Even the crickets refused to sing. Inside the palace, candles guttered and died for no reason at all. Servants whispered that the ancestors had turned their backs, that the gods were waiting to see if the king would truly defy them. In the queen's tower, Amara sat cross-legged on the cold floor, the tortoise carving before her, the map spread open beside it. She memorized every curve of the route Shani had drawn, through forest, across dry plains, into the canyon called the Gorge of Whispers. Her breath came slow and controlled, Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. At the edge of her hearing, a voice drifted, low, mournful, almost human. "You can still surrender," it whispered. "You can be safe." Amara looked toward the sound, but there was nothing except shadows and dust. "I was born in danger," she whispered back. "Safety is for those who serve." When the moon reached its highest point, she moved. From beneath her bedding, she pulled the small clay sphere Shani's allies had hidden weeks earlier, a smoke bomb made from marsh reeds, dried oil, and bitter herbs. She struck flint. Sparks hissed. The clay cracked. A hiss of white smoke erupted, thick and acrid. Outside, the guard coughed, stumbled, eyes watering as the fumes bit his throat. Amara pressed a damp cloth over her face, slipped through the half-open door, and caught the guard's wrist before he could cry out. "Forgive me," she whispered, then struck him cleanly at the neck with the flat of her hand. He crumpled without sound. She dragged him inside, bound his hands, and wrapped herself in his cloak. Every step down the servant's staircase felt like a drumbeat counting toward freedom. Her bare feet made no sound on the worn steps. Torches burned low. The palace slept uneasily. When she reached the courtyard, she stopped. Beyond the outer wall, the whisperwood waited, dark, endless, humming with unseen life. She found the rope ladder coiled where Shani's messenger had promised. Her fingers trembled only once as she hooked it over the parapet. For a heartbeat, she looked back, to the palace glowing gold behind her, to the faint shimmer of her mother's old window above. "I'll return," she whispered, "but not as they expect." Then she climbed down and vanished into the night. The whisperwood swallowed her whole. The path wound between trees that whispered secrets in languages older than kingdoms. Branches clawed at her cloak. The ground pulsed with unseen roots. She kept moving. Every breath was a prayer. Every rustle behind her a reminder of how close Mambisa's shadow still lingered. At dawn, she stumbled into a clearing where the earth gaped. The riverbed. Once this place had sung with water and birds. Now it was only cracked clay and silence. Amara knelt, pressed her palm to the dirt. "Mother River," she said softly, "your child is still here. I will bring you back." The dust clung to her skin like a promise. She followed the map's lines westward, through thorn and sun, until the scent of green returned. Vines hung like curtains, heavy with dew that glimmered even under the weak sun. Behind the vines stood a hut no larger than a goat pen. Smoke curled from a tiny chimney, blue and sweet. Shani stepped out before Amara could speak. The old woman's eyes widened, then softened with a mixture of fear and pride. "Child of Nyala," she murmured. "You came alone." Amara bowed slightly. "My father sent me. He said you would guide me." Shani sighed. The king finally remembers wisdom. Inside, the hut smelled of earth and pepper leaf. Amara drank broth from a wooden bowl while Shani cleaned the scratches on her arms. When silence settled, Shani drew in the dirt with her finger. 3 symbols, each glowing faintly in the firelight. "The countercurse needs these," she said. "The seed of the stone palm, a drop of royal blood freely given, and the true dowry, a gift born of love, not power." Amara studied the symbols. "And the seed?" Shani pointed eastward. "It grows only in the Gorge of Whispers, where the serpent's breath touches stone. But the canyon is a liar, child. It will show you what you desire most, and drown you in it. Speak only truth, or the gorge will keep your voice forever." Amara nodded. "Then I will go." "Take this," Shani said, slipping a reed bracelet over her wrist. "It listens when you forget to." When Amara stepped outside again, dawn had broken fully. The air smelled of wet clay, though no rain had fallen. "Truth is waiting," Shani called after her. "Find it before the lie finds you." Amara journeyed 2 days through the barren wilds. The sun carved blisters into her shoulders. Thorns tore her feet until each step felt like fire. Still, she pressed on. When the horizon finally opened, she saw the canyon yawning before her, vast, trembling with heat and whispers. The sound was everywhere, soft, endless, like 1,000 voices breathing secrets into her ears. She stepped closer. The wind tugged her hair and murmured, "Daughter of water, do you fear us?" She swallowed. "I fear only forgetting." The canyon laughed, a sound like distant thunder. And then she entered. The gorge of whispers wrapped around her. Alive. Faces seemed to form in the rock, eyes blinking open and shut in the dust. She walked until her own shadow split in two. A figure waited ahead, tall, familiar. Her mother. Nyala's smile was tender, her arms open. "Come, my daughter. You've done enough. Rest." Amara's eyes filled with tears. Her mother's voice was the sound of cool water. How she longed to run forward, to bury her face in that illusion of love. But Shuni's warning echoed, "Speak only truth." Amara straightened. "I love you," she said softly, "but you are gone, and I am not." The image shivered and blew away like sand. The whispers rose higher, mocking, swirling, and deeper in the canyon, a new voice began to hum. The trial had only begun. Amara moved deeper into the gorge. The air changed with every step, heavy and trembling, as if the canyon were breathing around her. She could feel its heartbeat in her chest, steady and slow, ancient beyond reason. The walls curved inward, echoing whispers she could no longer tell apart from her thoughts. She saw movement in the dust ahead and paused. A shape emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, the outline unmistakable. Her father stood before her, the crown still shining faintly on his head. His face was hard, his voice sharp and cutting. "You shame me, Amara," he said. "You have betrayed your blood and your people. Come back and obey your king." For a moment she could not breathe. The weight of his voice pressed against her like the heat of the sun. But somewhere inside, a steadier voice rose. "You are not my father," she said. "You are my fear wearing his face. My father may have lost his way, but he is not a monster." The image froze, eyes wide, and crumbled into sand that scattered at her feet. The canyon shuddered, as though something vast had stirred. Amara kept walking. The path narrowed until she had to press against the stone walls, scraping her palms raw. Ahead, the whispers grew gentler, almost pleading. The ground sloped downward, and she saw it, a ribbon of water glinting in the darkness. Her throat ached at the sight. She knelt and dipped her hands into it, but the reflection that stared back was not her own. A serpent's eyes gleamed in the water, black and endless. The illusion smiled. "Drink," it whispered. "Be free of hunger, free of pain. Drink, and you will never be alone again." Her lips trembled. The water looked pure, sweet, alive. But then she saw the truth beneath it. Coils shifting like smoke, scales glinting with malice. She laughed softly through her exhaustion. "Even thirst will not make me drink deceit." The stream vanished. The canyon roared with a sound that was not anger but approval. The ground beneath her feet began to glow faintly, revealing a path carved in light. She followed it upward until the walls opened to a hidden valley at the gorge's heart. There it stood, the stone palm. Its roots were fused into the rock, its trunk as pale as bone, its leaves shimmering like silver under the thin sun. The tree seemed to hum with quiet power, each leaf vibrating in rhythm with her pulse. Amara approached slowly. The air around the tree felt alive, pulsing with an energy that made her skin prickle. She could sense that it knew her name. She reached out, but a voice spoke, not in sound, but inside her chest. "To pluck what lives from stone," it said, "you must give the stone its due." She understood at once. She drew her dagger and pressed the blade to her palm. Pain flashed bright and quick, but she did not flinch. Drops of blood fell onto the roots. The tree shuddered as if drinking deeply. A soft glow spread from root to branch, and one of the leaves unfurled into a small, glowing fruit. Amara caught it before it touched the ground. It was warm, throbbing faintly, as if it held a heartbeat of its own. "Truth has weight," the voice murmured. "Bear it wisely." She wrapped the fruit in cloth, bowed her head, and whispered a prayer she had not spoken since childhood. For the first time in many moons, she felt the sting of tears. When she looked up, she saw clouds gathering far away, heavy and dark. The sky was remembering how to rain. She began the journey home. Her legs were weak, her lips cracked, but she walked with the strength of purpose. The world around her seemed to shift, the air cooler, the birdsong returning. On the fourth evening, she reached the dry plains. She passed a group of travelers huddled beside a dying fire. They saw her and fell silent, recognizing the royal insignia carved on her staff. One of the elders rose and bowed deeply. "The princess walks the old god's path," he said. "May the river follow her feet." She thanked him softly, shared her last water with them, and continued through the night. By dawn, the towers of Ashari pierced the horizon, pale against the rising sun. The air trembled with the scent of dust and coming rain. The city looked the same from afar, yet she felt it had changed. Perhaps because she had. As she neared the gates, she heard the distant beat of drums. The sound was slow, mournful, ceremonial. Her heart tightened. The wedding. Her father was about to bind himself to damnation. Amara quickened her pace, ignoring the pain in her feet, the exhaustion dragging at her bones. Each step brought her closer to the place where her truth would meet his despair. She would face Mambisa. She would face the curse. She would face whatever waited beyond it. For now, there was only one thing that mattered. The river's voice was stirring again, and it called her home. The forest was not silent. It whispered, groaned, sighed. Every tree seemed to remember a name she had forgotten. Amara walked for hours before she realized she was crying without sound. Her body moved from habit. Her mind drifted between fear and determination. She thought of her father's eyes, the strange emptiness inside them, and she promised herself that when she returned, he would see her and know he had been saved, not shamed. The path twisted downward toward the old road that led to the Whisperwood's edge. The air grew heavy with mist. Her feet sank into damp earth, and once, something cold brushed her ankle. She did not look down. She whispered to herself instead, repeating her mother's old prayer, "Where the river bends, truth waits." When she reached the hidden garden, Shani was already there. The old woman had lit a small fire and boiled water in a cracked clay pot. Amara sank beside her, exhausted. Shani handed her a cup of bitter tea that tasted of ash and herbs. "The canyon is farther than it looks," Shani said. "Beyond it, the stone palm sleeps in its rock bed. You must wake it." Amara nodded. "And if I don't? Then Ashari becomes dust." Shani's voice held no threat, only truth. She opened her palm to reveal a charm woven from river reeds. "Keep this with you. It listens to your heart when you forget yourself." Amara tied it around her wrist and rose. "You've helped me more than I can ever repay." "Then survive," Shani said. "That will be enough." Amara left before dawn, guided by the faint glow of stars that flickered through the thinning mist. Her sandals wore down to shreds by midday. Her skin burned beneath the merciless sun. Yet she did not stop. The image of her father's weary face and her mother's smile, soft, eternal, pulled her forward. By the third night, she reached the Gorge of Whispers. It was wider than she imagined, a wound carved into the earth, its sides rising like walls of glass. From below came a sound that made her skin crawl. Whispering, constant, overlapping. Not wind, not water, but voices. Some laughed, others cried. A few called her name. She gripped the edge of the cliff, took one long breath, and descended. The ground at the bottom was cool, damp, scattered with bones of birds that had flown too low. The light here was strange. Neither day nor night, only gray. She walked carefully, her every step echoing like a heartbeat. After a time, she began to see things. Shadows moved at the corner of her vision. A figure formed out of the mist, ahead. Her mother again, beautiful as ever, her eyes kind and wet. "Come, my daughter," the figure said. "You've done enough. The people will forgive you if you come home." Amara almost stepped forward. The longing tore at her. But something in the air was wrong. Her mother's shadow had no feet, and her smile trembled like smoke. "I love you," Amara whispered. "But you belong to the past." The vision dissolved into 1,000 sparks that vanished into the canyon walls. A second figure appeared. Her father, younger, proud, his voice thunderous. "You have shamed me. Your rebellion has doomed Ashari. Do you wish to see your people dead?" She felt the weight of guilt crash through her chest. For a heartbeat she wanted to fall to her knees, but she forced herself to speak. "I wish to see them free, not afraid, even if they hate me for it." The canyon answered with a rumble like approval. The air shifted again. The whispers grew softer, turning almost like a chant. Then she came upon a stream, narrow but shining. Water at last. She dropped to her knees, cupped it in her hands, and saw her reflection shimmer back at her, until it blinked. The reflection's eyes were no longer hers. They were serpentine, glimmering with green light. The voice that rose from the water was slow and sweet. "Drink," it said. "One sip and all pain will vanish. Drink, and the world will love you again." Her lips were parched, her throat raw, but she only smiled. "If I drink, I become a lie, and lies may quench thirst, but never truth." The stream hissed and disappeared. The canyon trembled again, louder, as if applauding. The walls cracked slightly, and sunlight, real sunlight, spilled down in narrow beams. She followed the path of light until it widened into a hollow where stone gleamed pale and alive. The stone palm stood waiting. Its roots were thick as pillars, its leaves thin and silver like blades. The air around it pulsed. The tree seemed to breathe with her, slow and ancient. Amara approached carefully. When she reached out, her hand tingled, as if the tree's pulse were answering her own. A voice filled her chest, quiet but commanding. "To pluck what lives from stone, give the stone its due." She understood. She drew her dagger across her palm. Her blood dropped onto the roots, glowing faintly before sinking into the rock. The tree trembled, a low hum spreading through the canyon walls. A single fruit unfurled from one of its branches and dropped into her hands. It was warm and light, beating like a heart. She whispered, "Thank you," though she was not sure who she was thanking, the tree, the river, or the ancestors themselves. As she wrapped the fruit in cloth, she noticed the wind changing. The air smelled different, cleaner, wilder. She looked up and saw the sky forming clouds. For the first time in years, the wind smelled like rain. She began the long journey home. Days blurred. The fruit never left her grasp. She slept beside rocks, beneath dying trees, beside strangers who shared bread and silence. Some recognized her from carvings on temple walls. Others simply bowed as she passed. They did not know what she carried or the danger that waited ahead, but they felt it. Hope always travels faster than news. On the last morning, she stood on a hill overlooking Ashari. The city lay quiet beneath a pale sun. The palace glowed in the distance, its towers proud, its banners black. She could hear the faint echo of drums. The wedding had begun. She tightened the cloth around the fruit and started down the hill. Every step felt heavier. Each heartbeat sounded like a drum counting down the moments to ruin. By the time she reached the gates, the guards barely noticed her. Dust-covered, hooded, moving with the purpose of someone they could not name. The people lined the streets, their faces grim, their eyes hollow. Some prayed aloud. Others turned away, unable to watch what was coming. Inside the courtyard, she could already hear Mambisa's voice. The witch was reciting the rites, her tone smooth and venomous. The king stood beside her, motionless, the serpent's scale glinting at his throat like a jewel. His eyes were blank. Amara pushed through the crowd, her hood falling away. Gasps followed her. Someone shouted her name. Heads turned. Even Mambisa's chant faltered for a heartbeat. The witch's golden eyes widened, then narrowed. "You dare interrupt the river's will?" Amara stepped forward, her voice clear. "The river has no will for deceit." The crowd murmured, restless. The guards hesitated. Jomo turned, his lips parting in shock, and for an instant, she saw her father again, the man before the curse, before the grief. "Amara," he whispered. "I'm here," she said, "and I have come to end this." The witch raised her staff, but the king lifted his hand, stopping her. His voice was weak but human. "Let her speak." The wind stirred between them. The serpent's scale glimmered. The clouds thickened overhead, and somewhere far away, thunder began to roll. The reckoning had come. The sky was bruised with storm clouds. Lightning rolled across the horizon like restless spirits. The courtyard was packed with people. Citizens, guards, elders, all frozen in a silence that felt like the moment before a scream. At the center stood the altar, draped in black cloth. On it rested the serpent's scale, glimmering like oil. Beside it, King Jomo waited, pale and hollow-eyed, his crown sitting crooked on his head. And there was Mambisa, the witch of the Black Rock, her golden eyes burning with cruel delight. When she saw Amara standing at the gate, mud-streaked, cloak torn, yet unbroken, a thin smile touched her lips. "The prodigal child returns," she said. "Come, princess, kneel and finish what your father began." Amara stepped forward, and the crowd parted instinctively. Every eye followed her. She stopped a few feet from the altar and raised her chin. "You have deceived the throne, Mambisa. You've twisted the prophecy to feed your own vengeance." The witch tilted her head, amused. "Vengeance is a word for those who have forgotten justice. Your line stole the river's voice from mine. I only teach it to speak again." "You teach it to hate," Amara said. "But I've seen what the prophecy truly says. The serpent's dowry was meant to be returned to the river, not claimed by blood. You are the thief, not my father." Mambisa laughed, a sound that cracked like lightning. "Truth, lies, words. Do you think they change what's coming? The drought will devour your people until the price is paid." "Then I will pay it," Amara said. She unwrapped the cloth from her satchel and revealed the glowing fruit of the stone palm. The light bathed the courtyard in silver. The crowd gasped. The witch's smile faltered. "You don't know what you hold," Mambisa hissed. Amara met her eyes. "It's what the earth gave me for my truth." She turned to the altar and set the fruit beside the serpent's scale. "This is the real dowry." King Jomo stared at her, torn between awe and terror. "What have you done?" he whispered. "What you should have done, father," she said softly. "Faced the lie instead of kneeling to it." Mambisa's voice rose in fury. "You would undo centuries of power? You think your blood is stronger than the curse itself?" Amara looked at her father. "I don't know, but I know it's stronger than fear." The witch lifted her staff. The serpent's scale pulsed, its surface rippling like water. "Then watch your truth die with you," she screamed. She brought the staff down, and the air exploded with wind. The ground cracked. The sky roared. The crowd fell to their knees as thunder rolled through their bones. Amara stood her ground. The wind tore at her hair and robes, but she did not move. She reached for her father's hand and gripped it tight. "The serpent only rises when we forget who we are," she said. Jomo's eyes cleared as though waking from a dream. He looked down at their joined hands, then at the serpent's scale glowing like molten stone. He realized what the witch had stolen from him: his will, his humanity, his daughter's faith. He turned to her, voice shaking. "Tell me what to do." "Give freely what you once gave in fear," Amara said. The king drew his dagger, pressed it against his palm, and let his blood fall onto the fruit. The crimson drops sank into the silver skin, which pulsed brighter and brighter until the light was blinding. Mambisa screamed, her voice twisting through the storm. "No, you cannot unmake me." The serpent's scale cracked, splitting down the center. From the rift poured a rush of wind and light so strong it threw the witch backward. Her golden eyes flared, then dimmed as her form began to dissolve. "You think this ends me?" she cried. "The serpent sleeps in every throne." Her body shattered into ash that swirled upward, and vanished into the storm clouds. The ground shook once more, then stilled. The sky opened. Rain began to fall, first in thin drops, then in torrents. The people lifted their faces to it, crying and laughing all at once. Jomo sank to his knees. The blood still ran from his hand, but he smiled through his tears. "It's over," he whispered. Amara knelt beside him. "Rest now, father. You've carried too much." He looked at her one last time, pride softening his face. "Your mother was right," he said. "The river always remembers its children." He closed his eyes and bowed his head. The rain soaked him, washing away the dust of years. When Amara looked again, he was gone. Only his crown remained, lying in the mud beside the serpent's shattered scale. She picked it up and held it against her chest. Around her, the people of Ashari wept and rejoiced. The drought had broken. The river would live again. Days later, the waters returned in a rush that filled the riverbed to its brim. Fish darted between the reeds. Children splashed at the edges. The people rebuilt their fields, their homes, their faith. And in the center of it all stood Amara, not as princess, but as queen. Under her rule, the altars were torn down and replaced with gardens. No blood would ever stain the soil again. Each year, on the first day of rain, the people gathered by the water's edge to sing of the storm that had saved them. They sang of a king who gave his name to the river. They sang of a daughter who turned her courage into rain. And when they spoke of the witch, they did not curse her name. They pitied her, for she had sought power and found only loneliness. In time, the story of Ashari became legend, carried by travelers beyond the mountains. Some called it a tale of sin and redemption. Others said it was about love's defiance. But those who knew, the ones who still lived by the river, told it simply. It was the story of a girl who spoke the truth when no one else dared, and a father who gave everything to make the river remember. The rains have never stopped since.
But when the river ran dry and the earth began to die, the king made a deal no father should ever make. To save his people, he had to marry his own daughter. This is the legend of the serpent's dowry, a story of power, deceit, and a love strong enough to break a curse.